The Dungeon Master Experience is a series of articles written by Chris Perkins in Dungeon Magazine in 2011. The following readings are his words, and though produced before the current edition, still contains great insights, advice, and tips for Dungeon Masters for any edition, and for that matter, any TTRPG. What's in a Name? 7/14/2011. Wednesday night. The heroes have embarked on a quest to retrieve Fathom Reaver, a cutlass with the power to unite the Sea Kings of Iomandra under one banner. However, time is of the essence, for the cutlass is also hunted by their arch-nemesis, a merciless, one-eyed dragonborn warlord named Vantajar. This mythic weapon was last seen in the hands of Sea King Draken Malios, whose ship was lost in the Battle of the Roiling Cauldron nearly a century ago. Somehow the cutlass found its way into the elemental chaos. In last week's game, the heroes set sail for the Demon Maw Sargasso, and were drawn down into a deadly vortex. They survived the descent, and their ship came to rest on an ocean of jagged ice in the elemental chaos near several other vessels trapped in the frigid wasteland, including a ship made of black glass and another made of stone. Not long after their arrival, the heroes came face to face with the captains of these stranded vessels, a fire-haired Azure named Captain Zarence, a storm soul genasi named Captain Ferric Spark, a stone-skinned half-giant named Shrador, a water archon named Warloose, and a frost-bearded dwarf named Parsilla Shatterbone. "Oh, frabjous day," my players cried. 5 new NPCs to add to the ever-growing cast of thousands. One of my frequent readers, Matthias Schaefer, sent an email to dndinsider@wizards.com asking why I give my NPCs weird names like Drake and Malios and Vantajar, instead of more pronounceable ones taken from English such as Hammersmith and Clearwater. He's also curious how I make my players remember such odd names so that they don't end up calling them the Dead Sea King or that Dragonborn dude. First, you all need to know that I have a problem. I like concocting weird names. It's a favorite exercise of mine and one that drives me to create entire lists of names that I keep in binders for handy reference, so that if I ever need a name on the spot, I have scores of them to choose from. And once I choose a name from the list, I strike it off so that I don't end up reapplying it to another NPC down the road. It's one of the best DM tricks in the world because it gives my players the impression that I've named every NPC in the campaign, which I suppose I have. No John Smiths. There's a reason why you'll never encounter an NPC named John Smith in my campaign. I find that common English names rip players out of their fantasy world. Even Jonah Hammersmith treads a little too close to reality for my tastes. However, I have no problem with Jaxar Hammersmith, a dwarf name. In fact, I'll add that one to my ever-growing list. When I set out to build the cultures of my campaign world, I decided to apply certain naming conventions to each race. The tieflings in my campaign are refugees from a fallen empire, so I decided to derive their names from the Roman and Greek cultures, example Decimith, Bakari, Prismius, Psychon. They also have names more akin to those presented in the player's handbook, Tiefling Race Entry, examples Suffer, Sunshine, Thorn, and Tyranny, although these names are usually self-chosen monikers. Dragonborn names tend to come from Egyptian and Middle Eastern cultures, examples Haraj, Bayal, Kafira, and Nazir, or sound like names one might ascribe to dragons, examples Drax, Nagarax, and Resk. I tend to give elves and Eladrin lyrical multisyllabic names, which is fairly stereotypical. Examples Ariandar, Lorifir, and Talonian. Dwarves tend to have simple first names with hard or earthy consonants. Examples Glint, Halzar, and Korlag. Or names pulled from Polish and Hungarian name generators. Examples Guri, Ferko, and Szilard. And they usually have compound last names comprised of 2 common yet emblematic words smashed together: Ambershard, Ironvein, and Stonecairn. Halfling names are simple and playful. examples Corby, Happy, Rabbit, and Zyza, and their last names tend to include some thematic tie to nature or water, examples Blackwater, Skipbrock, and Yellow Crane. The gnomes in my campaign, though few in number, have cornered the market on silly first names tied thematically to magic, examples Don Keywheel, Dweomer, Smidgen, and Sparkle. My human names are all over the map. I tend to go for names that sound like seldom used real-world names. Examples Urando, Caven, Fenton, Mirabelle, and Remora. The last names with roots in Western European cultures, examples Cascarho, Moonridge, Ratley, and Van Hayden. Or names built around nautical terms, examples Coldshore, Keel, and Sandshoal. The trick is coming up with names that sound human but seem grounded in the world of fantasy, not reality. In my campaign, a name is used to evoke a certain mood or fortify the image I have in mind when envisioning the NPC. It's trite, but evil NPCs tend to have evil-sounding names unless I'm deliberately playing against type or trying to mislead the players. Lorzo Zalagamar and Azrael Tharn are two dwarf villains in my campaign. A combination of letters and sounds in these specific examples, the letter Z coupled with the R sound, gives the names an indescribable harshness or sleaziness. Talia Winterleaf, Alethar Balefrost, and Aramor Sunshadow are elves. Here I use specific words such as winter, balefrost, and shadow to help reinforce their sinister role in the campaign. Sometimes it's a combination of words that really sells the name. Case in point, the Wednesday night group recently ran afoul of a Warforged villain named Iron Smile, and on occasion, I'll surprise my players with a lighter name and apply it to a villainous character, as happened with the minor gnome villain and bard named Clef Wimbley. Remembering names. I don't go out of my way to burn the names of NPCs into the minds of my players. They will remember the ones that are memorable, and they'll forget the ones that are forgettable. If the NPC appears frequently, or has a decidedly memorable quirk or manner of speaking, my players have a much easier time remembering the name. However, I don't sweat it. My campaign includes thousands of NPCs. There's no way my players can remember them all. If Azrael Tharn is remembered as the dwarf vampire who turns into a puddle of oil, I'm cool with that. If all else fails, the players can usually count on Kurt Gould, the group's record keeper, to surf his campaign notes and remind them if and when it becomes important. I try not to shove names down my players' throats because it usually comes across as forced and too often leads to mockery. For example, I would never have my villain announce, "Kneel before me, for I am the pirate warlord Vantajar, scourge of the Dragon's Sea." That's a little too much camp for my tastes. Better to have an NPC's name remain a mystery until the players express an interest in learning it, or they'll be more inclined to remember it afterward. Would Voldemort have been half as memorable unless it should not be said? I must admit, my players have created a private game around trying to guess how I spell the names of my NPCs. The first time a name is mentioned, they take cracks at trying to spell it, anticipating the presence of a silent H or the use of a ZH instead of a J. How many different ways do my players spell and pronounce the names Zybon Krinvaz or Zaidi Arakosa? More than one, let me tell you, and that is okay. As far as I'm concerned, such names add realism to the world by virtue of the fact that they are strangely built and difficult to pronounce. I know plenty of real-world people whose names are equally challenging. Try pronouncing John Shindetti or Bill Slavesek correctly, I dare you. Fortunately, my players have the benefit of hearing me say the names, so they're not just reading letters off a page. Lessons learned. The first several pages of my campaign binder contain lists of random names, organized by race. Down the right-hand side of the page are blank spaces where I can either add new names or record notes concerning the names I've used. For example, human first names and human last names. First names: Anlo, Arando, which is crossed out, Azura, F, Bram, Kale, which is scratched out, etc. Last names: Arcalis, Bilger, Blackstrand, which is scratched out, Carnarvon, Coronar, which is scratched out, etc. Names: Arando Coronar, Knight of Arden, Kale Blackstrand, Warden Drax's spy. Where do I get my names, you ask? I've trained my wee brain to devise new names on a whim, but when I'm stuck for looking to flesh out my list, I turn to several readily available sources. The internet. Need some good names to populate the inhabitants of your dwarf stronghold? Try doing a Google search on Hungarian names. Need names for that rampaging clan of Goliaths lairing in the mountains? Try searching for Hawaiian names, or Native American names. The internet is full of baby name lists, pet name lists, and other lists. If you can't find the perfect name on such a list, take two names and smash them together to create something new. Movies. Every movie in the past 20 years has a scrolling list of end credits filled with great names. Plop yourself down in front of your laptop or big screen TV with a notebook. Skip to the credits at the end of your DVD copy of Hellboy or Return of the King, and make note of some of the cool fantasy-sounding names that appear. You'll be surprised how many good ones you'll find, particularly if the movie was filmed on a different continent. RPG supplements. Campaign-focused books such as Forgotten Realms Campaign Guide and the Eberron Campaign Guide are strewn with names that can be repurposed for home campaigns. I can flip to any page in either of these two books and find an invented word that would make a great NPC name. Real names. Take a real name and tweak a few letters to create something new. Chris Perkins becomes Kiristo Perek. John Smith becomes Joran Snith. You get the idea. Until the next encounter. Also, don't forget to follow the link in the description to pick up my first ever adventure and setting for free on Patreon and DriveThruRPG now. Dive into the desert region of Gondolar as adventurers making their way to the budding city town of Silt Pass in search of gold, glory, and answers to the secrets of a long-lost empire. In this first adventure, your heroes will defend the Dune Dancer, a sandcutter airship from a legendary group of bandits known as the Stormbringers. Do you have what it takes to stop the Stormbringers and their bombastic leader Tharok, or will you make a deal with the devil of the sands and join them? Decide your destiny in the first of 6 adventures. TSI, Tharok, Stormbringer, Iron Mane.